Good morning, and thank you, Elaine, for that great intro. I'm going to jump right into this. I'm going to try to cover about 20 slides, and my goal is to do it in somewhere around 45 minutes. Make sure there's plenty of time for questions and answers at the end as well. But if you have a question related to a slide as we're going through, you put it in the chat. I've got my PowerPoint slideshow set up in such a way that I can see both. So hopefully I'll catch that, and we'll try to get your questions addressed. So first thing, if you want to go to the FEB website, this is where you go, and then you go through the education and training under committees, and then go to FEB webinar series, and that would get you to a lot of the slides that we have presented over the years. So please feel free to make yourself available to that. For those of you that have attended other trainings that FEB has sponsored, like and Elaine has mentioned, the mid-career training that we did back in October, or the webinars from December of 2023, I hope that this training is consistent with those prior trainings, and it helps you create your plan. And so as you take these various trainings and you put together the things that you're taught through the course of them, you can put together a good plan for your finances and ultimately your retirement. So let me go ahead and move to the next slide here. Disclaimer, these are my opinions. They're not the Kansas City FEB's or the training committee's opinions necessarily, although they should be. Whoops, my phone just fell over. Hopefully we're still good here. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to provide some information for federal employees so they can make your own wise and informed decisions. We don't have time to get into all the details on TSP loans or TSP in-service withdrawals or how they work here. So we're just going to cover them at a high level since they tie in closely with TSP success strategies. The TSP has printed several PDF pamphlets that go into what the TSP loans and TSP in-service withdrawals are and their rules. And they're kind of beyond the scope of this presentation, so because of the restriction of time. What else? I'm also assuming here, for the purpose of this presentation, that the markets will continue to grow like they have substantially over the last 100 years or more. I know that for some of us, the last 2 years has kind of felt like our 401k or our TSP has become somewhat of due to the drop in value and things like that. I know I recently did home heating oil in my house, and I previously paid 89 cents a gallon, and it's now jumped to $2.39. So I felt that. So if you think the market's not going to continue to grow like it has historically, then maybe the TSP is not a good investment. But for the rest of us, we're going to continue to contribute to the TSP and hope it grows as we move towards our retirement. Okay, let me move to the next slide. I'm going to do a brief background on the TSP. The TSP is a retirement plan set up for federal employees and offers some of the same type of savings and tax benefits that many other corporations offer their employees under 401k plans. So that's what Congress was trying to do, is mirror those. So the hallmark of this plan initially was to allow employees to make pre-tax contributions to retirement funds and to help better control their own retirement and match those private sector options that were available. So when Congress initially passed legislation, they were moving away from the old CSRS, Civil Service Retirement Plan, into the new Federal Employees Retirement Plan, with Social Security as another leg of that retirement stool. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move into the next slide. So moving in there, let's talk a little bit about the background of this. Okay, so the FERS retirement system was designed to have 3 base retirement components. The first is the FERS annuity, and that's calculated based on your high 3 consecutive or successive. This could really be consecutive years as a base earnings as a federal employee. So this is what I call the defined benefit component of a federal employee's retirement. Then the next piece is Social Security. And so an employee is normally eligible for Social Security at age 62 if they meet all the requirements, the 40 quarters of a year, with the full retirement age at or near age 67, and it depends on your date of birth. So this is what I call the safety net or base layer component for federal employees first. And then the last piece, and this is the one that we're going to talk about here today, is the thrift savings plan, and this is the defined contribution component. So you get to choose how much you contribute in this. And of course, there are other components that you need to consider as you prep for your retirement. So many people have other sources such as IRAs that they have on the side, real estate, CDs, bonds, annuity investment, real estate, business income. Some people even have money in digital currency. So, by the way, let's see, let me talk a little bit about the Social Security full retirement age. Generally, that's age 67, although please note, for some of you, this Congress could easily increase that age down the road to 70 or 72, and they can pretty much change that at any time. As you know, we're spending a lot of money every year, and so we have large federal budget deficits, and so we're approaching a lack of funds to cover Social Security payments over the next few years. So consider this a realistic possibility. I kind of look at that as changing the rules after the game has started, but to be honest, Congress has done that many times over the course of American history, especially for Social Security. Let's see. So generally, I think the federal employees have a pretty decent retirement plan overall. Once all the components are fully functioning as intended, all three of these items. So if done correct, they can have a very comfortable retirement. One strategy for federal employees could be to retire early, move their TSP balances out of the TSP via the one-time transfer, then systematically convert their what's now an IRA money over to Roth contributions over several years and complete that before they start drawing Social Security so as to lessen the taxes on the Social Security component. This is kind of a win-win for us. The money you leave in your estate could all transfer to your heirs tax-free, which could be better as well. So let me move to our next slide here. Let's see that slide. Whoops. I think I jumped a little bit. Okay, let me move to the next one. Okay, let me talk a little bit about TSP, what its real purpose is. Okay, so the first reason for the TSP is retirement. That's the main reason for it. It's not really for anything else. So if you want to do other things like plan for your children, plan for buying another home or whatever, you really should save money on the side and not use the TSP. Okay, so we're going to cover these 6 areas. The first is the reason. And so there's the concept of deferring taxes. So when you put money in the regular TSP or a regular IRA, you're deferring the taxes on those amounts that you're contributing. So you don't pay the taxes now, you're going to pay it later on the grown portion, which includes the principal amount that you put in plus all the earnings or growth, hopefully, that grew on those funds as you put them in. Okay, TSP, so that lowers current taxes. The TSP Roth lowers your future taxes because when you put money into the TSP Roth or a Roth IRA, the taxes, you go ahead and pay them now, but later on in life, hopefully when it grows, you'll pay less taxes by paying it now. Or since I work for the Department of Agriculture, I use the concept of pay tax on the seed and not on the harvest. So there's our little USDA plug on that. Okay, next you kind of need to determine if you want to go TSP or TSP Roth. So there's your contribution type with the end goal or strategy of retirement in mind. So it's my strong preference as the instructor of this course that the Roth TSP, or at least a Roth conversion of TSP funds, be strongly considered before the employee goes into full retirement and starts drawing their Social Security. Next, you need to determine how much you can or will afford to contribute. More earlier in your career, at least historically speaking, will grow a lot more over the course of time because time is on your side if you use it wisely. The next thing we're going to talk about, let's see a little bit, is TSP loans, what they are and how do they affect your TSP balances. Okay, and then last we're going to talk about TSP withdrawals when they're appropriate and when they're not. And generally, as a rule, the appropriate time that you really want to take money out of a TSP in the form of it would be after retirement. So that's kind of my suggestion on that. All right, let me move to the next slide. Don't see any questions so far. All right, looks like we're doing pretty good on time. Okay, the TSP is designed to provide an additional income component for retirement to make a person much more comfortable retirement for his employee. It's focused on that, and that is its primary focus. So we really want to stay there. It's really not for a new home or a lake house or a vacation or medical expenses or education or other large purchases. If those are your goals, my suggestion would be to put more money in savings or get a home mortgage or a HELOC or something, buy those, and put a little less in the TSP, at least initially, and fund those separately or later on in life. And try not to mingle retirement funds with non-retirement funds. And so a little mature budget discipline here will go quite a long ways. And if you look at the items that I'm suggesting throughout the course of this training, you'll see a pretty high level of consistency in terms of what I'm suggesting as far as a process for you to go through that's real consistent with some of the other trainings we've sponsored, as I previously mentioned. Let me move down here and go, whoops, let me close it out of that. Sorry about that. All right. Next slide here. Why should I not use items? Well, we want to talk about this concept that I learned in one of my college economics classes, and that's called the concept of opportunity cost. So anyone that's ever taken a college economics class knows that this refers to the opportunity versus another, since often you cannot do both. It then compares those opportunities and determines what the lost opportunities are amongst them. So the opportunity cost equals the opportunity lost. So for example, and this is kind of a non-financial comparison, just to make sure it's clear what opportunity cost is, I could go to the lake maybe over the weekend and relax, or I could stay home and go to a birthday party. I can do one or the other, but I really can't do both. So if I go to the lake, I have to go down there, getting in the water, doing all that, depending on what time of year it is. Or if I stay home, I can enjoy the birthday party. And I have both of those benefits. So when we compare the two opportunities, each has an opportunity cost or a lost opportunity associated with doing it. So what we're talking about here is some lost opportunities, and we're going to get into that more as we move through these slides that you run into. Okay, so let me move to our next slide here. And this is slide 8. Okay, so I'm going to compare a little bit of the pros and cons of the regular TSP versus the Roth TSP. So the pros are to defer taxes now on the money that you put into retirement. The cons are taxes historically tend to go up, so they could be a lot higher later on in life, and income usually does not go down for a lot of people in retirement. In fact, I think most federal employees, they're still going to be in a pretty decent tax bracket when they retire. So a lot of your Social Security income gets taxed in retirement, and the Roth IRA could help avoid some of this. So those are some of the pros and cons of the regular TSP. Then for the Roth TSP, the pros are you can plan for a better retirement if you deal with some of the taxes now. That also eliminates a lot of surprises later. And as far as up here where I talked about taxes that historically tend to go up, I know, like, for example, sales taxes. I live in Kansas. When I was growing up, the sales taxes were around 4%. Now they're closer to 9, 10% when you buy things. So taxes over time tend to go up. So a lot of times I feel it's better to pay the tax now. Okay, so some pros for the Roth TSP, you can retirement if you deal with those things now. Cons are you can pay more taxes now. People are struggling to pay bills at the current time. So for example, you've got a kid in college, you've got kids in private school, you got financial challenges, then it might make sense to pay less tax now and pay less or pay more on in life when the kids are gone, and you can better handle that. Okay, generally the Roth is better. All other things being equal, although some actually benefit by doing the regular TSP over the Roth in their retirement. So everybody's situation is different, and so you kind of got to take a hard look at where you're at and what the scenarios are. Like, for example, the taxability of Social Security. If you're a single person and your income in retirement goes above $25,000, then for a certain level, half of your Social Security becomes taxable. And then above another certain level, up to 85% of your Social Security becomes taxable. So if you're married, that number starts at age 32. And I'm going to jump all the way down here to another slide that I put in here this morning. So this talks about Social Security and how it's taxed in retirement. So if you're single and let's say your income from your first retirement is $24,999, you don't pay any tax. But let's say on top of that, as a single person, you have $10,000 of Social Security. Now, of that additional $10,000, your income is going to go up to $29,999. So 50% of that is going to be subject to tax. So now you're going to pay tax on right at $30,000. And if let's say your FERS annuity pays you $24,999, but your Social Security is $20,000 a year, now up to 85% of that $20,000 or $17,000 more dollars is going to be taxable. So you take this basically $25,000, you add 17 grand to it. Now $42,000 is going to be the amount that could be. And then if you're married filing joint, it's there. So if you want to compare those, there's actually what one could call a marriage penalty on that, because usually for most things the tax bracket's doubled, not for the taxability. If you want to know more about that, you can just go Google this, and there's blogs all over the place. What is the tax percentage of Social Security? In other words, how much do they take? Okay, well, that depends on what you tell them to take out of your Social Security when you get that far, William. So that's kind of how that works. So the idea is enough so that you have just that probably you don't know once you get to retirement. Okay, so let me go back to the slide I was on. Let's see, I think I was right in here. Yep. Okay, so I think I covered that. Let me move up to the next slide. Okay, contribution. Okay, and again, the more you put into the TSP earlier in your career, the better, due to the longer time horizon for that money to grow. For example, a 20-year-old kid or a 22-year-old kid puts in 10% of their earnings, and that will likely double the amount of a person that waits till they're 30 and puts in, say, 10% of their earnings. So the balance for the 20-something will be double. 40, there's even less. So the higher percentage you put in the TSP and the more you get in when you reach your retirement age. And these next 3 slides I'm gonna kind of cover that. And what I did was I used, what website did I use? Let's see. I used a website on future value of periodic payments calculator, high accuracy calculation, Casio.com. So that's the site that I went to do this. And I tried to make this real simple, not throwing a lot of variables, because otherwise you kind of lose the concept. So this first and I hope everybody can see that. This is a person that starts at, say, about age 40, and they contribute for 20 years. So the interest rate is 7%. And if you look historically at what the markets have done or is done in some of the stock funds, 7% is very conservative. The average for those that invest properly in the markets, they go up 10% a year. So 7% is very, so a person's 40, they contribute for 20 years. So, you know, planning for, say, age 60 retirement, they do $1,000 a month. That would get them to start about $520,000 sitting in their retirement fund when they get to retirement. And we know that if I really raise this up to 10%, it'd go up a whole lot more. So let me slide for somebody. Remember, that's 520 grand. Now let's show you for somebody that does it at when they're 30, so 10 years earlier in life. So interest rate still 7% years, 1,000 a month, which is 360 months. That's 1.2 million. So it went from age 40 down to age 30. You went from 500,000 to 1.2 million, and that's just at 7%. Okay, so let me move to this next slide in this progression. Let's say somebody does it for 40 years. So say they're in their 20 or in their 20s, 7%, 40 years, $2.6 million. And I'm telling you, so we went from 500 grand to more than double to 2.6 million. If this interest rate were really 10%, that amount would be probably double. So the gap between them is huge. So the point of all these three slides is, you want 500 grand in, or 1.2 million, or 2.6? Well, you want more. So the point is, put in more, put it in as early as you can during the course of your career, and just keep going with that, and you'll be in a lot better shape. All right, so I think I covered that, and you get into the concept of the power of compounding. So the lesson here is, if you accumulate more, or you put in more earlier, you accumulate a lot more over the course of your career. Okay, let me go to this next slide here. So how much and these items that are highlighted in yellow, these are things I added earlier today, so they're probably not posted out on the SharePoint site yet. Just little tweaks I make as I go through preparing to present, because I prepared this 2 or 3 months ago, and I was looking at it today to get ready to present to you guys. So how much can I put into the TSP for 2023? The short answer is, well, it depends. And what's it depend on? Your age. So if you're under age 50, on the last day of this year, you can put in up to $22,500 in any combination into the TSP and or the TSP Roth, but your limit is 22.5. You can't go over that. So for the calendar year, so that translates into about $865 a check if we have 26 paychecks this year. And I didn't really look if we have 26 or 27 this year, so you got to look at that too. Then if you reach your 50th birthday on or by, so I put in the slash, so you might want to put that in your notes, by December 31st of this year, you can contribute an extra $7,500 for a total, for a total of 30 grand for 2023. So a person could literally be 49 years old, but if they turn 50, you know, on December 30th or 31st of this year, they can still contribute the 30 grand, even though they're 49 during the time they contribute almost all of it, as long as they're going to turn 50 on or by that date. So in that case, 26 paychecks, it'd be about $1,154 a check if there's 26 pay periods. And some agencies are different in 26 versus 27 as well. So you'll need to look into that if you want to pursue that a little further. But I try to put in the max I can into mine, and I've been doing it for a whole bunch of years, and it really adds up over time. Okay. Let's see. No other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Let me move on to the next slide then. Okay, portfolio balancing. What is it? Basically, it's simply determining a ratio of how I'm investing the money in the 5 TSP options, which is, you know, G fund, the government securities, the F fund, which is like that's the equivalent of the Shearson, Lehman, Hutton fixed bond index fund. The C fund, which is your common stock index fund. The S fund, which is your small cap fund. So that'd be small company indexes or investment stock funds. And then I, that's your international funds. And I went to a training that I paid for a couple of years ago out in Arizona, and they talked a lot about this. Now it's critical that you have components in every single piece, and how you, you know, you want to take a look and measure your age and your risk, and how you want to stay balanced between them, and you want to periodically balance. So why is it important? And let me get into that a little bit, and based on the time here, I'm going to tell a quick story. A couple of years ago, I had in my mix it was correct in the way I did it, and the market went down. So what I did was I took and I reallocated money in a much higher amount that was sitting in my G and F funds, because, you know, as the stock funds dropped, the G and F funds really didn't drop much. And so, in fact, the G didn't lose any. So what I did was I rebalanced. So I essentially moved some of the money from the G and the F back over to CS and I. And then when the market went right back up, it grew a huge amount, like a year's salary worth in a couple of 3 weeks or a month. It was really fast. So by rebalancing, I took advantage of the market and rode it back up. I didn't panic and start pulling money out of these stock funds. I just rebalanced. And so that's why it's really important. You can really save a lot of money. And I learned that trick from a guy 25 years ago that worked. He was like 25 years older than me or something. And he showed me that trick. So the mix you use is real important. And if we have some time at the end, I can kind of ratio I use, but just bear in mind, I'm in my 50s. You might be in a different scenario. I'm fairly aggressive, but so you just kind of look at that. All right, let's go to the next slide. Where are we at here? Okay, so TSP loans. I want to talk about what those are and how do they work. So there's two types of loans, two general types, and I'm just going to talk high level here because obviously in the interest of time, we can't delve into it too much. There's a general purpose loan, and you do that for at least $1,000. You have to pay a setup fee, and it runs from anywhere from 12 to 60 months. But you can pay it back earlier. Like say you're 8 months in and you got enough money to pay it back, you can write them a check, and then they'll stop taking it out of your biweekly paycheck from your agency. Okay, now primary residence loans are different. You can do up to a max of $50,000 for all loans at any one time. And there's some overlap between the two. You can't go over all of them. So if you already got a general purpose loan out there for a couple $1,000, then maybe you're limited to like 48 grand on a primary residence. So, and this is over a longer period of time. This can go up to like 15 years if you wanted to do that. I personally don't recommend doing this because what you're doing is you're doing three things. When you do a TSP loan, you have to pay a fee, so that money comes out of your TSP, you lose it. Yeah, I know it's only like $75 or whatever, but it's a cost that the TSP is determined is necessary to cover the cost to administer the loan. So I get it from their side that they need to charge this money, and it's only fair that if they're spending all this time servicing somebody that takes a loan, somebody like me that doesn't do that, they should have to in that service. I get that. Second, when you take out a TSP loan, then there's limits on when you can contribute money to the TSP for certain periods of time. So if I'm sitting there for 6 months and I can't contribute money to the TSP, not only have I robbed the balance of the TSP, but now I can't start putting large amounts back in. And so the time value of money on those other slides that I showed you, you can see that over time that could add up to a very large amount of money. So, and then of course the opportunity cost there of not having that primary residence loan money because you took it out, or the general purpose loan money over the course of the rest of your career could add up to a lot of money. So the opportunity cost loss here, or opportunity cost, is huge. So you got the fees to process it. You have the restrictions on when you can jump back into the TSP and contribute. And so you also lose agency match fees as well. And then you have the overtime lost opportunity costs. So those are the three reasons that I'm not a big fan of taking out TSP loans. I get the fact that people get in a bind and they have all these other things, but if you have a budget and you have money in that budget for emergencies, a lot of times that should be really the way you want to do that to cover this scenario. Okay, so let me move to the next slide here as time's moving along. In-service withdrawals. Generally, these are withdrawals that you take, permanent withdrawals from your TSP balance, and from TSP balances, non-Roth, the non-Roth piece, they're taxable as ordinary income, and they may be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if you're sitting there with loans where you've taken out withdrawals, and then you go ahead and retire and you haven't paid back that money, the TSP will send you one shot to pay it back. If not, it becomes taxable. And if you're under age 59 and a half, for a normal civil service employee, then you have a 10% penalty and a the Internal Revenue Code. So not only do you pay tax on it, you pay another 10% penalty. So you probably don't want to do that. I have an example in here of a story, but I don't think I have time to go into that, of a guy that essentially did this on his 401k and he took it out. And because of that 10% penalty, he ended up paying about 20 grand more back to the government than he ever saved in taxes over time. And then when he gets to retirement, all that money is gone. He doesn't have it for retirement. So I don't have time to go into all of that here, so I'm going to skip past that. I am going to start moving towards wrapping up here. So here's some of the things, and these are my opinions again, but they're based on a lot of hard empirical evidence. So take them for what they are and see how they apply to your situation. First of all, the TSP is for retirement, and as a rule, it's not for any other purpose. If you need money for other purposes, set that up separately from the TSP. You'll be better off, and you'll thank me later. Okay, the TSP Roth will provide better planning and transparency in retirement over the TSP because it better addresses income and estate issues and eliminates the need to plan for some income taxes in retirement. So, second thing, if you put in the most you can afford as early in your career as possible and you continue to do that as long as possible at higher tax rates, that's the best strategy for success. And it may not be the only strategy, but it's a very good one that's time-tested based on a lot of research. So, plus you're paying tax on the seed, not on the harvest. So what I'm saying there is you might be paying tax on $1,000 now, but if you pay it later, you're going to pay it on, say, $3 grand or $5 grand if it really grows right. So it could be cheaper that way as well. Periodic rebalancing of your portfolio is very important. It needs to be done periodically with the regularity because the markets change often. We don't want to try to time the market. Literally, most people that try to time the market, and the TSP even did a bunch of analysis of people that tried to time the market and started doing all this moving money a lot. That's why they put restrictions on the amount and the number of times you can move money around in your portfolio during the course of a month. You get basically 2 chances to move it around and then one back into the G fund. So, and they charge if you do more too. So that's why. So, but people that are even in this business, financial planners, less than 1% of those people actually know how to time the market. So if the professionals, only 1% of them can do it and do it with some level of accuracy, you don't want to do it. So my recommendation is don't time the market. Okay, the last thing, TSP loans as a rule are not recommended because they cost too much and they hurt your overall ending balance, and the opportunity cost is huge. You cannot imagine, based on the power of compounding interest, how much money you lose by doing TSP withdrawals. They are appropriate and recommended only for dire emergencies, those that you didn't self-cause or plan, and they were initially intended, which is for retirement. Okay, another few key takeaways. Still don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, maybe I'm just going too fast. You need a personal or family budget and emergency savings account before you put in much in retirement. This should be slated for cover about 3 to 6 months primary living expenses. I have that and we use it. I don't have to delve into it too much, but it's a good strategy. It should also make unnecessary the need to take out money out of retirement funds because it's all about being budgetary, having good budgetary disciplines. Do I recommend allocating percentages, rebalancing to the funds based on the acceptable risk and market conditions ourselves, or just letting the software do it for us in the life cycle funds? I know folks who just invest in the CNS and swear by it, but that seems a little risky and less diversified to me. Okay. That's a great question. It depends on your age. It depends on your risk tolerance. You think of the L fund. The L fund is good for those that don't know that much about these funds and don't individually invest. The L fund is really a hybrid of those 5 funds that I already talked about. So what I do is, do I have the ability to type here? I go like this. Here's what I do. I go 15% G, 10% F, 20, whoops. And I'm putting this in the chat if you guys are looking, 20% C, 40% S, and the remaining 15% I do I. That's how I do it. Now, people that are younger and older than me, they want to change that scenario. So what am I saying? I'm saying cash, I'm 15% in the cash, I'm 10% in the bonds, and then I'm like 75% in the markets. And I do think the I is very important. The L fund is good for someone that just doesn't have a good strategy. I think if you use a strategy like this, you can do even better than those funds. So that's what I do. But that's not a one size fits all. The 15, 20, 40, and 15, 15, 10, 20, those five. So it just kind of depends. Okay. I plan on retiring in 10 years. My contributions have been growing into TSP standard and start adding. Yeah, I do. And the reason I do is because most likely your taxes are going to stay the same or go up in retirement. So you can pay the tax now on the seed and pay less later on in life on the harvest, even if you're 10 years out. So say you're 46, you're going to retire at 56, or you're 50, you're going to retire at 60 or whatever. I'm not in a place myself where I can do the one-time transfer and take it out. You got to be at least age 59 and a half, and I'm not there. Or I'd move it on out of the TSP. I'd move it over directly, plan to plan, pay no tax on it, and then start figuring out a plan for systematically converting it over to Roth. Okay, let me see if I can go through this. Contribute at least 5%, contribute to as early as you can, contribute as much as you can afford for better retirement. And unlike the Roth IRA, there are no income limits with contributions based on your earnings. That's what I'm talking about here. Let's see, and if you max out your contributions to the TSP before the end of the year, you could lose out on agency matching. I talked about that. Okay, let me come back over here. I am 59 and a half. Can I do a one-time transfer? Absolutely you can. And I would literally, if it were me, I'd take out everything and leave maybe 5 or 10 grand in there. I'd take it all out and move it over into the private sector. And the reason I would do that is in the private sector, you have 30,000 funds that you can invest in. So versus the five that we have are good. They're pretty good. They set a good standard for government, but for all plans together, you know, the more options you have, the better off you are. Okay, do you have one or the other? Well, okay, great question. When I started, all I could do is regular TSP. So I have all this money for all these years, all the way up until we got to 2012. And it was May of 2012, and the USDA said you could put into the Roth. So then I pretty much stayed 100% Roth and just pay the tax now. So yeah, I still have a whole lot more sitting in the regular or standard, as you call it, than I do in the Roth. And that's because for all those years, it's been accumulating and compounding pre-tax. So then my next plan will be get to age 59 and a half, move it over, and then start converting it to Roth and pay that tax. So by the time I turn 67 or later and draw Social Security, then a lot less of my Social Security could be taxed, or at least that's the theory. Plus, I'll have a lot more in my estate, and if I don't ever use it, it'll go tax-free to my heirs. All right. All right, let me see if I can cover another slide, which I think I'm right here on this. Okay, so if you max out, you could lose matching, leave the funds in the TSP untouched for the career. This is the takeaway. So borrowing hurts. If you take it out before 59 and a half, there's generally a 10% penalty. Now, under FERS, if you're a law enforcement person, that's age like 55 or 50, depending on your scenario. Some funds cannot be rolled into the TSP Roth. You can't roll IRA money into the TSP. Funds withdrawn from the TSP are prorated. Well, actually, they changed that in September of 2019. So now you can withdraw from the sub-account level. So you can pick where you want it to come from. You see my preferences. Saving more increases your options for a time when you need them most later on in life. Okay, let me go look at some of the questions. Does it make sense to do 50 to Roth, 50 to TSP? Yep, it does. Depends on your scenario. In my case, I'm doing 100% Roth. I'm really sold on the Roth. I think it's a better long-term strategy. Younger people now, they literally do only Roth. Although, let's say somebody starts here and they're 20 years old and they go all the way till retirement. When they get to the end and let's say they retire and they've done Roth their entire life, they still have a portion that's regular that's going to be taxed in retirement. And that's the agency match piece that was paid in. So, okay, let's see. I'm sorry. Did you say transfer from the standard IRA into the Roth? I like the idea of transferring from the standard into the Roth, but I also, especially for somebody 63, yeah, you got to look at how you want to do that, or if you can even do that, because you don't want to just, like, say if you have $500,000, you just don't want to transfer it all in one shot, or you're going to write the IRS a check for, $140,000. So you got to do it in stages, and maybe you can't. You're old enough now that you can't do it all. Do what you can, and then when you get to retirement, start taking from the regular and save the Roth for later. Doesn't company contribution go into the standard? Yep, I just talked about that, so I answered that. Okay, let me cover this, what's really the last slide here, and then I'll come back to the questions. The TSP Roth is better for long-term because of income tax purposes. Now, I did add a couple things here to the slides that were posted. So you could consider converting all your TSP Roth prior to age 72 when you have to start taking RMDs. And actually, I wrote this in October, November. I built this slideshow for a presentation today. And since then, the law has changed. So the RMD age is now 73 as of January 1. So that's very, very current. I look to see that it'll go up more over the future. And the reason they do it, these people that are voting these laws in, how old are they? So they're wanting to save their own taxes. So they're real game on doing that. The irony is it puts less money in the treasury, and the way money's getting spent right now, I don't know how they can keep doing it. But okay, TSP Roth has no R&Ds. Social Security up to 85% is taxed. That's that last slide that's in this set that we put out there. Agency matching has never been taxed. So that answers that question a couple times now. Let's see. If you choose to exchange your TSP balance, for a MetLife annuity, and that's the company that federal government uses, OPM is contracted with at retirement, the money's locked up and you can never get to those funds in large amounts. So you're giving up a lot of flexibility for the rest of your life if you choose that route. Now let me see if I can find my notes on that. I don't want to say a couple other little things on that. Where is that? Because I don't have those. But essentially what you're doing here is if you go get one of these MetLife annuity things, you're betting against the insurance company. And it's never a good idea to bet against the insurance company. Yeah, it's safe money. It's safe for the rest of your life. But if inflation goes way up, you're going to get hurt anyhow. And you have no ability to pull that money out. Let's say you need $10,000 for a major surgery. Well, you just get that money every month for the rest of your life, but you can't pull out a large amount against it. Okay. Everybody still there? Can you guys still hear me? I think I bumped my phone and I'm talking through that.
We can hear you.
Can somebody put in the...
We can still hear you, Jeff.
We can hear you.
Okay. I was worried about that.
Hey, Jeff, this is Elaine. There was a question back there. I don't know if you got an answer, but someone had a question or a comment saying, do you have to have one or the other? You can't have both standard and Roth. I think you clarified that, but you can have both.
Okay, let me talk to that. That's a great question. You can do both. You can do half into the regular IRA, the standard, and half into the Roth. It's just that you can't contribute more than either the $22,005 or the $30,000, depending on your age, and for the course of the whole year. But you can do part into one and part into the other. If you're trying to figure it out, that's a good approach to take. I think that's what I did in 2012 when they first brought this online. Then once I got to 2013, I went to 100% Roth, and that's what I recommend. Okay, doesn't company contribution go to standard? Yes. If I parlay the RMD on a traditional TSP directly to my charitable contribution, oh yeah, wouldn't that? Yeah, that's a good way to avoid taxes. Up to 100 grand, I believe. I've heard that we can allocate directly to the charity. Yep, and not get taxed. You can do, yeah, up to 100 grand. That would get rid of that, surely. Okay, the recently passed Secure Act allows the option companies to make to Roth instead of traditional. Will the TSP make this available in the future? I would look on their website. Good question. I do not know. My guess is whatever happens in the private sector, give it a bunch of years and the federal government will slowly follow. I mean, that's the whole premise in setting up the TSP in the first place. Do I recommend me changing my TSP contributions? I have 20% to traditional pre-tax and 10% to Roth, and I'm 57. I plan to retire in 3 years. Personally, I'd tell you to do it. Yeah, I like 100% Roth. I'm real sold on that. In most people's cases, if you look at the numbers, and the main thing is here, if you look at this Social Security thing, this was passed into law in 1992 or 3. That was a Bill Clinton, Al Gore thing, because Al Gore had to cast a tie-breaking vote in the Senate to get that. They haven't adjusted these for inflation in how many years? So yeah, the more you can put into the Roth, the better off you are. Okay, let me see. Have I covered? That's a recap. What can I decide? Yeah, do a 50-50. Do I have anything else? This is just options. You can look at those. That compares what I already said. Here's one other little interesting thing. The TSP tallied up huge losses in 2022. And if you read all this through, or if you want to go read the whole thing, you got to type in all of that. Or maybe you can click on it, copy it. I think it's a picture though, so you'd have to type it all in. But 40% of the TSP millionaires dropped by 2/5. So 40% of the people that were TSP millionaires 2 years ago are not TSP millionaires because of what the market did. I think that's kind of interesting. Somewhere here I have all the links. Okay, What led you to the percent allocations you selected? Great question. I love this question. What kind of resources are there out there to get allocation ideas and suggestions? There are endless amounts out there, Zachary. Again, I talked about I paid for on my own expense, on my own dime, a couple grand for my wife and I to go to Phoenix. I'm going to say 3 years ago. And I went through this seminar and this guy went through and he talked about the critical nature of keeping it balanced. That's why you should have like a certain percent in the international funds, because I don't like the idea of investing in international funds. I know none of them go to China, Russia or anything, but you need to be globally allocated as well. So I went to that a couple of years ago, and that's what led me to all that. I paid money, I went and I studied and I learned. Do the max contribution amounts to traditional include only my contributions, or do I have to take into account agency contributions? Great question. It's only the amounts you contribute. The agency contributions are above and beyond. So last year, if the total amount was, and I forget what it was, I think it was like 27 grand. The total amount that went into mine was more than 27 grand. It was 27 grand plus whatever 5% of my wages that the agency matched. So call it 30, or I don't remember what it was, but yeah, so it's only the amount you contribute to get to the 30 grand this year or the 22.5. Does the TSP allow us to do Roth conversions? Nope. That's a very hot topic, but they haven't allowed us to do it. Like I said, the only way to do it is to transfer it out of the TSP and then convert it yourself. That's why I talk about this. If the TSP allowed us to do it, I'd have been doing it since they allowed us to, and I just bite the bullet and pay the money. These are great slides. Do you mind sending them to us? Sure. Yeah, if you go to this website, KCFEB, and that's also on the very lead slide. That's there. Do I see if I can open that? Okay, that's over here. Okay, so here's the FEB website. This is kind of cool. Nobody ever takes you there. Go to committees, whoops, go to education and planning, and then go down here to FEB webinar series, and then it's in here. It's here, this one. And since I tweaked it a little bit, she'll post an updated version. There's some of the other ones I covered in the past. Those are out there. So, yep, right there. Okay, what's the max allowable for age 50? Last year it was like 27 grand. Yeah, it went up 3 grand this year. How do you get where you can contribute so much? Ha, that's a lovely question. Budgetary discipline. You can't go out to eat every single night or whatever. Also, you know, it depends on your scenario. If you're single, if you're the only one contributing to the family budget, that's a factor. So, you know, I drive a Prius. I don't drive a Cadillac. That's probably how I get to that point. And do it in stages. You know, if you're a GS11 and you're going to get your 12 next year, maybe you're only doing 14% this year. And next year, you get your 12, now you can do 16%. And pretty soon you can hit the max. The sooner you can hit the max, the better off it's going to be for the rest of your life. Let's see, this thing is recorded. They're going to post it on YouTube. All right, let's see. Does the TSP website have any tool to estimate your end amount accumulation? I know I had with previous 401k websites. I think they do. I'm pretty sure they do. You go look at it. And if they don't, there's 100 financial planners that would love to have your business, and they've got something that does. But you can also do what I did up here on these slides up here. Where are those? And Michelle is glad that I'm the one running the slides here. I drive her crazy. Where you can put in these amounts and run the numbers, you know, for each scenario. Okay, let's see. Because the TSP is limited to 5 funds, where was I? I was here. Do you recommend rolling in a previous 403 and 457B into the TSP or keeping them separate to have more fund options? Oh, this is an awesome question. I love this question. And if you live in Kansas, the answer is better for you. Wow, this is great. I would roll it into the TSP. Well, I kind of need to know your scenario a little better, but as a general rule, if you roll it into the TSP, when you take money out of the TSP and you're a Kansas resident, none of it's taxed. So as long as you do it right and you play by all the rules, none of it's taxed. So if you roll this money over to the TSP, then when you roll it back out into a TSP rollover, and as long as you do it all correctly, I probably should do a webinar on that. None of it will be taxed in Kansas. So yeah, if I had 200 grand sitting in a 457B, I'd roll it into the TSP, and then as soon as I turn 59 and a half, that'd be part of what comes right back out. Okay, for me, getting to where I can afford to contribute the max every year is taking a while. Yeah, paying off debt, staying out of debt are the key. Of course, life. Yep, exactly. Where are we at? 56. We've got a few more minutes for any other questions. I think I kind of covered everything. A lot of the stuff I do at the end is just a recap, so I've said it 2 or 3 times and make sure I've covered it all. Here's some of the links. But if you want, I can talk briefly with the time I got left a little bit about Kansas and how that works. And I assume I'm still on video here, John. So for Kansas, there's this package called, I'll try to hold it steady. Yeah, it's on blur mode. Let me turn, I don't know if I can turn off blur, but anyhow, if you go to kansasrevenue.org, let me type that in. So if you go to the Kansas Revenue website and you go look up Kansas XK, you go to Kansas package XK, you go to that package and you go all the way over here to page 35 at the bottom. It talks about subtractions from federal adjusted gross income, and it goes into this thing and it talks about benefits that are exempt from Kansas income tax. And then you go to the top of page 36, it talks about federal civil service, disability, retirement, blah, 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 including the thrift savings plan, you can't read it, but okay, so pages, I'll just put it in the chat. 35 to 36, right at the bottom. And it's TSP. But here's the key. If you take money out of your TSP and you roll it over, you only roll over that money into a new clean IRA. And you want to make that IRA say something like TSP rollover FBO for benefit of, in my case, Jeff O'Connell. So it'd be its own IRA, and don't mix any other IRA money in it. If you commingle it, you can lose the taxability exemption. So set up your own clean IRA, roll it over, and then when you take it out, you'll have to explain it to Kansas and probably send them proof that the money came straight from the TSP into that fund and then out to you. And if you can show the paper trail of all of that, Kansas will exempt you. I had a former supervisor call me up a year ago and thank me for telling him that, because he got a letter from Kansas. He did what I told him to do. They said, okay, it's not taxable. Any final questions? Thanks for your time. I know we covered a lot. I didn't get to everything I wanted, but I think we covered it.
I think you did a fantastic job, Jeff. I think you did a fantastic job. As always, thank you so much for coming today, visiting with us, and having you spend the last hour with us for our presentation with Jeff O'Connell for USDA. I just posted the link again if y'all want to follow up. The next couple of months, we're covering everything for this last survey for the next 3, I think it's 2 questions. If you don't mind filling that out, we'd greatly appreciate it. The next 3 months are going to be covering over Excel tips, trips, and things to remember, PMAP, and a couple of great other opportunities and speakers here in the next 3 to 4 months. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. As always, thank you again from the Kansas City FEB.